First, what OXO2 is. OXO2 is a decimal digit 2 written in a hexadecimal form, or as we all like it, bytes. So your Ethereum address, for example, is a hexadecimal form of a number, and this is the way how you write a decimal digit 2 in a hexadecimal form. But we're not going to be talking about that today. We're going to be talking about validators. So meet Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob both running Ethereum validators. They both have 32 ETH, and Alice is running the current standard of validators, which is OXO1 validator, and Bob is running OXO2 validator. And this number is actually a withdrawal credential prefix, which determines how your validator interacts with the withdrawal credentials and what are the rules according to which your validator operates on the consensus layer. How would we know the difference between these two? Well, let's move a bit further in time and see what's going to happen with the rewards for the validator operated by Alice. All of the rewards that will be accumulated on the balance of OXO1 validator would eventually, in a pretty reasonable amount of time, be sent or swept from the validator balance to the execution layer withdrawal credentials, or simply speaking, your wallet. This is because the min activation balance and the max effective balance for OXO1 validator is essentially the same value, 32 ETH. So it's pretty convenient when you can deposit 32 ETH, then get some rewards, and with a certain intervals, you can get your rewards on your execution layer. On the other hand, one may say that it is not convenient because whenever you get your ETH on the execution layer, it is no longer staked. So that's why we have OXO2 validators, where your rewards are just accumulated on your validator. They so-called compound so that your validator balance can grow and you can get even more rewards and even more of them can compound. The question is how long it's gonna last. And to answer this question, we need to zoom out a little bit about that. And then wait for eternity, or let's assume that it's not an eternity, but Bob just made a few more deposits to his validator. And now the balance of his validator is 2048 ETH. This is the point where for OXO2 validator, any rewards accumulated above that will now be sent to the execution layer withdrawal credentials in the same way that it is done for OXO1 validators. So to summarize it up, OXO2 validators can accumulate or compound balance while OXO1 cannot. OXO2 require almost the same hardware per validator as OXO1. So it doesn't matter if you're running one OXO1 validator or one OXO2 validator, most of the requirements would be the same other than the requirements that are specific for peer DAS sharding, which depend on the amount of ETH staked rather than the number of validators. And OXO2 withdrawal credentials are better for Ethereum network because, as you can see, one OXO2 validator can accommodate 64 OXO1 validators in terms of ETH staked, which means that there is a potential to reduce the total number of validators on Ethereum network from the current, number of how many? Around 1 million validators, yeah, 64 times. So go to like 100,000 or like way less, like below 100,000. So OXO2 withdrawal credentials are good. If they are good, why do we see this picture? That's the picture that shows us the percentage of withdrawal credentials among Ethereum validators. And as you can see, this huge blue donut is OXO1 validators. And one may say, like at least those who are very into math and like to argue, they would say that, oh, but OXO2, they can be 64 times bigger. So why should we look at this graph? Let's look at the percentage of Ethereum staked controlled by each type. And you will be right, the situation here is a bit bigger, even though it's not a precise picture. We have the required data here. 22%, or like a bit more, of total ETH staked as of March 27 is controlled by OXO2 validators. The rest is controlled mostly by OXO1 and the legacy OXO0 validators. So the question is, why 1 year after this OXO2 credentials were introduced, after we understand all of the benefits, why do we see such a low rate of OXO2 adoption? And according to the Ethereum Foundation Protocol Support Research, who apparently surveyed most of you guys, and you've answered, at least those who are professional operators, that liquidity concern is the main problem. So this thing that we mentioned before, that with OXO1 validators, you frequently get your rewards on the execution layer withdrawal credentials, so you can serve redemptions, so you can do whatever you want. This rewards, they are not locked under your validator. While with OXO2, you have to accumulate balance up to 2K, and only after that your rewards are liquid. So I don't see major reasons not to trust Ethereum researchers. And let's again summarize it up. So for big players, OXO2 are not great because they want steady, predictable, hustle-free rewards delivered at a predictable schedule, even if they do not have 2K ETH or their total ETH stake is not a multiple of 2048 ETH. But there is another group of people, which are home stakers. And there are a few types of home stakers. Well, some of them are rich enough and they fall into big players. I mean, if you are a home staker and you have more than 32 ETH, I will arguably put you into the first category. But there are fractional home stakers, those who likely not have 32 ETH and those who provide only a fraction of this initial 32 ETH as a bond and then run validators. Good examples here, Lido CSM, Rocket Pool, Stater, and other protocols. And the problem for them, why they are not using OXO2 validators, is because they cannot afford bond for a full OXO2 key. So right now in CSM, you need to provide 1.3 ETH of bond per 32 ETH validator. If you multiply it by 64, you will end up with a number of something like 100 ETH, which is a lot. And for Rocket Pool, this number will be even bigger. So is there a way to solve the issue for big players and the issue for fractional home stakers? And for sure it is. And actually there are two. So let's start with the first one. Introducing EIP 8148, custom sweep threshold for validators. Remember Bob from our previous picture that had to accumulate rewards up to, or validator balance up to exactly 2048 ETH. Well, what if Bob can choose this value? Well, with EIP 8148, Bob is now able, imagining this EIP is implemented for sure, is now able to set a custom threshold, a custom value between 33 ETH and 2048 ETH for each validator Bob is running. So up to this value, he will accumulate balance, deposits, rewards, you name it. And after that, all of the rewards will be sent to execution layer withdrawal credentials. So that perfectly solves the issue with the rewards liquidity, because you can always define which portion of your ETH staked you want to have illiquid and staked, and after which all of the rewards will still be liquid. And that removes this unnecessary barrier for randomly selected value of 2048 ETH. So EIP 8148, with EIP 8148, Bob can set any desired amount of ETH to accumulate, get all of the rewards above this amount on their execution layer withdrawal credentials in a liquid unstaked form, and change this threshold any number of times and any time he wants. So that basically means that Bob now has a flexibility of choosing the size of his OXO2 validator. But it's not just that. EIP 8148 is also secure, which is very important for any change that we ever introduce to our beloved Ethereum. Because Bob cannot explicitly set a new threshold lower than the current balance, or in most cases lower than the current threshold, so that he cannot speed up withdrawals with this EIP. What he will have to do if he wants to set a threshold lower is he will have to follow a predefined process of partial withdrawals, take place in all of the queues, withdraw the balance, and then set a new threshold lower. But no gaming here. So Bob can still set it, but following the rules of the protocol. And Bob can set this threshold only from his withdrawal credentials. So if we talk delegated staking here, where node runner and withdrawal credentials holder are different actors, the one who owns the money, so the withdrawal credentials holder, will be in charge of deciding how this threshold should be set, should it ever be used or not, and how it should be changed. So in general, EIP 8148 is the way to make user experience for OXO2 validator withdrawal credentials great again. And as I've mentioned, this EIP is just proposed right now, so it's not reality. We've been in the imaginary world. And to make it real, we need your support. There are a lot of core developers here, and I insist on you scanning the QR code on the screen, checking out the details, more details about this EIP, asking questions, voicing support or concerns, so that we have a chance of including this EIP, this long-needed EIP, into one of the upcoming hard forks, preferably Hagota. But this EIP only covers the problem number one for big players, for those having a lot of money, big home stakers, or big players. What about fractional home stakers? What should they do, and is there a way in general, even without this EIP? Well, there is a way. It does not fully solve the thing mentioned in EIP, but it definitely makes it easier for fractional home stakers to get their hands dirty with OXO2 credentials. Introducing OXO2 CSM, the place where big validators meet low bond. To understand that, we need to understand the logic behind bond in CSM. Here you can see the current conditions for CSM. As I mentioned, 1.3 ETH bond for the validator of 32 ETH. So OXO1 validator, 1.3 ETH bond. Good. Where does this value come from? So first, again, to understand that, how it's used. It's used to cover slashing, offline penalties, potential MEV stealing, while the validator stake provided by the protocol is used as a stake in the network. Just for those of you who are not aware what bond is, because I think about it every day, so why not to rewind it for you who are not doing it every day. Now let's talk about the bond size. First, before getting ejected, so the maximum time of slacking in the CSM and being a naughty boy, not running your validator, is 3 months. After 3 months, for the default operator type, you will be ejected from the protocol and you will be penalized. So the maximum offline penalty that you can get and maximum missed rewards, also included here, that you can get over this 3 months is 0.35 ETH. Then, if you are really naughty boy, like the one that is even a bit malicious, then after this 3 months, you can also at the very last moment get slashed. Or, I mean, you can also be just naughty, unlucky boy. Anyway, in this case, your exit period will be prolonged to additional 36 days, and you will get slashing penalty. So in addition, you will get about 0.15 ETH penalty, which if we do a simple math here is 0.5 ETH. So now you are thinking, this guy is an absolute idiot. Why the bond is 1.3 ETH? And there is yet another factor that we also need to account when we calculate the bond size. And this is MEV stealing. And to be honest with you, blocks with the reward up to 1 ETH are not that rare on Ethereum network. And since the validator, you as a validator runner, can define fee recipient and can define where the execution layer rewards would go, it's pretty easy for you to commit stealing here and to simply say, do not send it to Lido. As a validator owner, I'm saying not send it to Lido, send it to my wallet. And since we frequently see blocks at around 1 ETH, like let's call it an average value with within a certain percentile, we cannot go to values as low as 0.5 ETH. So that's why the middle ground here is 1.3 ETH. Okay, enough of this very interesting and fascinating lecture. Why we did it all? To understand how we're gonna define the value of the bond for OXO2 CSM and why it will finally be affordable for home stakers. Well, we need to look at first two categories, and the math here is ridiculously simple. I have just multiplied both of the values at approximately 64 because the OXO2 validators are 64 times bigger than the regular, so I scaled linearly all of the penalties. But MEV stealing hadn't changed because it doesn't matter if you are big validator or small validator, the blocks you produce are the same. The only difference is that big validators produce blocks more frequently. But still, in a same event, in the same single event, you cannot steal like meaningfully more than 1 ETH, which means that this factor is negligible compared to the two above. And which brings us to the point where we can say that in OXO2 CSM, bond per single full validator can be just 32 ETH, which is equivalent of 0.5 ETH per traditional 32 ETH validator, which makes OXO2 CSM the most affordable option, the option with the lowest bond possible on the market. And let's wrap it up for OXO2 CSM. So bond of 32 ETH or even less, starting from the second validator. APR multiplier, and this is where I want to put a specific stress. APR multiplier of 2.26, which is important, which is in current terms is roughly 6%. But as you can see on the graph, for ICS, for identified community stakers in the current CSM, you can get to a higher value. But then the curve drops. For OXO2 CSM, there is no drop. It's only forward and upward. Only that. So it means it doesn't matter how many ETH you have. And if, for example, you're a professional operator willing to do a bit of a side hustle in CSM, well, why not? Now, multiplier of 2.26 is available for you with no limits, no questions asked. And the other rules are the same as in CSM. So OXO2 CSM is a great solution for home stakers to access this large OXO2 validators, for sure, if they have 32 ETH or more. And all of this beauty you will see live starting from Q3 2026. So OXO2 withdrawal credentials are for home stakers, thanks to EIP 8148 and OXO2 CSM. Again, I will very much appreciate support, comments, and discussions regarding the EIP we have just discussed, and I would appreciate even more you guys joining OXO2 CSM this summer or this autumn to make Lido even more decentralized, because we need more operators. You can never have enough of operators. So thank you so much for joining. If you want to learn more about EIP 8148, go scan this QR code. If you want to ask any additional questions or just chat with me and say how idiotic I look in this shirt on the stage talking about home staking, well, feel free to DM me in Telegram. And that was it. Oh, no, that wasn't. There's a few more things.
No.
Some of you might be thinking that we have skipped the IDVTC thing. And yes, we did. And we also skipped the increase of CSM share limit. But we will keep it all for the Q&A session, which will not be right now, but will be after 2 more talks. We will have a general panel here. So keep all of your questions with you. Bear with us for 2 more talks, and then a big Q&A session for that. Thank you.